Haps are listening, which they might at some point. We need more characters. Hey, Brenda, how are you doing? If you're on Twitch, if you're on Periscope, which is going away in a few days, if you are on another platform, if you're on YouTube, I am really happy that you're watching. I'd love for you to come over to Haps TV. If you come over to Haps TV, you can do this yourself. You can broadcast. You can multi-stream for free, and most people pay reselling. You have to pay a restreaming service to restream, to multicast. So you can do it all for free here at Haps. At some point, I think Eleanor will go in and put her invite or my invite in there, so you can join. Because if you want to talk to Brian in the chat, you'll have to join. So here we go, without further ado, Mr. Brian Dunning. And you're in charge of that, Eleanor. Sorry. We sometimes push the same buttons. How you doing, Brian?
I am doing great, sir. How are you?
I'm doing really good. I only knew Brian about 3 weeks ago from listening to his podcast for like 10 years. So Brian didn't know me, but I knew him pretty well. So it's been really fun. Brian, I was lucky to connect with Brian with another broadcaster here on Haps, and it was fortuitous because we've been doing stuff on Clubhouse, and Brian's trying to kind of set a rhythm and something going on in Clubhouse, and we're all kind of learning at the same time. What do you feel about like Clubhouse so far? What do you think the potential is?
You know, it's interesting. They're obviously trying to do something very different from what anyone else is doing with the live speaking and no recording and no pictures. Kind of all of those things I think are pretty unique. It's an interesting medium. I'm curious to see what's going to end up happening with it.
Yeah, my feeling is once it loses its exclusivity and the allure of being, even though it's like 3 or 6 million people on there, the allure of being in some kind of private club and getting access to, to important people, as that becomes overwhelmed with people, I just don't know how they hold that same kind of mystique. So, but I love it. It's one of the most, certainly the best networking, creative resource that I've ever experienced in my life. To me, it feels like the largest live gathering of live information that I've ever imagined. It's kind of like the Matrix or something like that. So
I think the whole exclusivity aspect of it is interesting from the perspective of the content consumers, the people who go on it to attend talks and listen to things and have fun. But from the perspective of the content creators, it's very inconvenient. I mean, I can announce it to 75,000 people on Twitter, and maybe 3 of them will have an account. So it's proving very difficult to get anyone in so far. That's
and
they need to work on.
Yeah, I definitely, and I guess that'll come when they open up to the rest of the world. I know they apparently have an Android developer because it's only exclusively on iOS. So if you don't know what Clubhouse is, as Brian said, it's this. Think Zoom meeting without pictures and a stage and an audience, and that's kind of how it all comes together. But one of the things that I like about the format that we have here, and it's not a new format. There's organizations that have been around a while that have done this, but it's that folks can actually chat and comment right here in the room. So that makes it much more enjoyable. And we can, if we wanted to, pull people up here to talk. So for people that don't know Brian Dunning, who's Brian Dunning? And you don't have to start at age 2 or anything,
So I'm best known for the Skeptoid podcast. I think obviously that's what I've been doing since 2006, and it's been my full-time life since 2010. So it's already got fairly long legs as far as podcasts go. And as we all hope these things will do, it's led to a great many other things along the way. So even all these years later, the podcast is still kind of the main bread and butter. But we now have a staff of people. We're a 501c3 nonprofit. We produce educational materials. We produce a couple of video series. We've done a number of movies now, including our first full-length documentary, and TV pilots, and and when you're out there doing stuff like talking about various urban legends, like I've done on the podcast, you always get snagged up by all these TV shows on Discovery Channel, History Channel, et cetera, et cetera. We want to interview you for our show on the Bermuda Triangle, whatever it is, and I've done countless of those little segments, and it's kind of that experience that led to the inspiration for our feature film, Science Friction, coming out soon.
Oh yeah, that's super exciting. And I know just seriously, like just hearing you say feature film, like, that's a big deal. And the work that you do in community and educating people and stuff with your work and the skeptical stuff is just fantastic. What's it like being a feature film? Are you the producer? Are you the executive producer, the regular producer? What's your role there?
I strictly exec produced this one, and I left the harder jobs up to more experienced professionals. So basically, I just got the money together and hired people and said, "Here's what it's about. Go make it."
Nice. Wait, are you? You're in it though, right?
No, I'm not in it.
Oh, you're not in it.
I believe there is one moment where you can hear me saying something in the background.
Oh wow! Oh wow! That's awesome. So yeah. So well, tell us. Can you tell us a little bit about it? Yeah, you've come full circle.
So what it's about is it's interviews with scientists who went on these TV shows as the talking head experts, and they were edited out of context or they were misquoted. In some cases, the sound editor will literally take the razor blade. Okay, well, not literally a razor blade anymore, but will take the words of the sentence and switch them in order and make it appear that this scientist is saying something completely ridiculous, because that's what these shows are all out there to promote. Completely ridiculous, supernatural, amazing, sensational, paranormal, alternate histories like the aliens built the pyramids. So we'll have a legitimate Egyptologist, and they cut his words up and make it sound like he said, why, yes, scientists do believe that aliens built the pyramids. And this kind of thing happens more than anyone would dare to guess. So we had no trouble at all filling a feature film with them telling their stories and correcting the record. We even got to have a couple of sting operations in it. Since the production it took a long time. We were in production for close. Pardon?
No, go ahead. Sorry, I blinked out there for a second, but I don't think you guys noticed.
We were able to do a couple of sting operations. Since the production was going on for so long, we would interview someone and then say, hey, next time this happens to you, set up your own microphone, camera, whatever in the room. Of course, following state laws, because the privacy laws for when it's legal to record and or videotape someone without their knowledge, that's a different state from state. And so we made sure we always did it legally. And we had some sting operations in there. We caught them actually. We got the original video of what the person actually said, and then we compare that right up to what aired on the TV show. And it can be terrifying.
Well, we have and Frank Lentz was involved early on with this Haps here, and Frank told me that Brian's a little soft and I'm a little soft. No, Brian's a little soft and I was a little hot, I think. Anyway, I've made some adjustments. Let us know how we're doing here, Frank. But we have a scientist in here. Well, we actually have Abyss here, who I'm not sure. I think Abyss is sitting in a rack of servers off the coast of somewhere, living in some digital place, because he's like the human Google. Abyss knows everything, and it's coming from him. I don't think he's not Googling it, so I think he's like some all-knowing being. But we have Ian McLaughlin here, who's at Anthropod, and he is a neuroscientist. And Ian is going to come on this show at some point, but he's saying a nightmare scenario for a scientist when you're being taken out of context, when you're being misquoted.
Yeah, it is. One of the questions, we always went into these interviews with kind of a standard list of questions. and then conversation would just kind of flow from there. But one of the standard questions was, after this TV show aired, did your phone start ringing off the hook with all of your colleagues calling you up and saying, "Oh my God, what did you just say on the Science Channel?" And why did you say that? And the answer was always no, that doesn't happen, because it's pretty well known among all the scientists who ever do this that this is what's going to happen. So it doesn't really surprise anyone when they see one of their colleagues on TV saying that, why, yes, scientists do believe the aliens built the pyramid, because they know that's the work of the editor and the director, and not the work of the scientist.
Yeah, aliens. I don't want to. I want to take like 15 seconds to say, and Brian might be able to say it better than me in 15 seconds, but let's say that aliens didn't build the pyramids, and it's perfectly plausible that human beings built the pyramids. There was no special pleading, no special magic. You can show how it's done using probably levers and all kinds of things, but the pyramids weren't built. I'm right? The pyramids weren't built by aliens.
I don't know. That's a pretty controversial thing you're claiming there. Humans were capable of stacking rocks all by themselves. Who would think?
Right? Yeah. Right. I like that. If humans, so the movie is it obviously the purpose is for educating the public about these things and bringing in awareness, but you also feel like you're, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, so I'll let you say it, but you also feel like you're kind of taking a swipe at these people directly, saying like, what are you doing? This is wrong.
We do that. We do that very explicitly throughout the movie. One of the things that two of the things that we have to worry about doing a film like this, since it's an actual commercial feature film and it's going to be out there in the world, is you have to make sure everything you're doing in your own movie is legal. We can't defame anyone, for example. We can't infringe copyright by showing their show. Clearly, we show a lot of footage from all these TV shows because we show the scene where the scientist was misquoted, right? And then we have him cut back to his office and he tells us about it. Now, clearly, everything we're doing is well within fair use for this material. So we had no trouble with that. However, there's a couple of scenes where we're editing together the footage from the TV show with the scientist telling the story. And the lawyers look at it and go, I think you're erring a little bit too close on the side of having the TV show tell your story for you. So we had to recut a few scenes to avoid that. But
oh, wow. Okay.
Defamation is the big one, because even though everything we say is absolutely true and the proof is right there on the screen, that doesn't mean that someone isn't going to decide to sue us for defamation. Some of the networks that we criticize are known to be very litigious, for example. Some of them are known to not care at all what anyone says about them. We had to deal with both kinds. So in order to put the film into distribution, you have to have an insurance policy that covers all of these things. It has to have writers for, so we have to have a regular E&O policy, errors and omissions. And it has to have a writer to cover defamation. It has to have another writer to cover copyright infringement. And to get those writers, you have to have lawyers go through the thing with a fine-tooth comb and write up these opinion letters for the insurance companies to refer to that says, in our opinion, the film is safe from being sued because of this, 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 and this. And this is very defensible because of this, this, this. So, this has been the last 6 months.
So that's like that.
Edit the film and upload it to YouTube and you're done.
That must cost a fortune.
It does cost a fortune. So we made sure that we left plenty of room in the budget for the lawyers. Unfortunately,
yeah,
that's life today.
Yeah, right. That's just mystifying to me. I can only imagine how frustrating it's got to be to sit there and like have your work picked apart. When you're working so hard on it, you're trying to make a point, and they're like, yeah, no, you can't. It looks like you might be telling the story through them, and yeah, that's got to be really an interesting way to work. I guess if you're making a feature film about a fictionalized thing, that doesn't matter. But when you're trying to do facts, it makes it incredibly difficult.
Yeah, in many ways, a feature film, a fictional story, a dramatic film is so much easier, so much simpler, I should say, at least from the legal perspective. These are things that I didn't know I was going to get into when I just started doing a podcast as a hobby. I didn't realize I was going to be out there looking for entertainment lawyer firms that didn't have conflicts of interest because they already represents all the studios out there. I mean, just that process alone literally took months to find a law firm that we could work with because of the sheer number of studios and networks that we criticize on the show.
So they would have a would they actually have a kind of, would it be a legal conflict of interest, or is it just that it's their client too, so they can't work with both of you kind of thing?
Yeah, like for example, one of the scenes has we're talking about a documentary film that Disney made. And so we now can't get an opinion letter from any law firm that represents Disney because they now have a conflict of interest.
Oh, wow. There's some interesting ways you can shut a film down. You can stop an idea. You can stop an idea because if it wasn't Brian Dunning, if it were Bill Dunning, he might have gotten frustrated halfway through and said, all right, I'm done with this. Frank Lentz says, Astronauts and Aliens and Ape Men. I want to read that.
Ah, it's good. You should. Buy it from the website. Skeptoid.com/store or Amazon or wherever books are sold.
That's and for the folks out there that don't know that, I'm sure they're guessing that's one of your books.
That's there's 5 books that were put together that were kind of anthologies or collections of episodes from the podcast, and I sure wanted to continue that, and I'm really hoping to come back to it one day. But it's just one of so many projects on our list right now, and I'm just spread too thin.
Right, I feel you. Hey, Ian, let me ask you. I know this is kind of the time of night that the little one is needing tended to, but I'm going to invite you up here, man. If you've got a minute, come up. If you don't, if you haven't done your makeup or anything, dude, I get it. Don't come up. But it'd be cool if you wanted to talk to Brian a bit about those things. I'd love to know how Brian and his team determine the credibility of contributors. Scott Atlas, for example, had institutional credibility, but clearly demonstrated he ought not to sustain it through his contribution to prior admin's COVID response.
Contributors? I'm not sure what you mean there, Ian. Contributors to our own programming?
Maybe, maybe he'll be able to come up and tell us or rephrase it. But I'm thinking I'd love to know how Brian and his team determine the credibility of contributors. Yeah, I guess maybe to in general or to your program. We'll have to see if he can clarify that out a little bit. Go ahead.
At a minimum, I can speak to the people that we featured on Science Friction. In this case, our film was to criticize a practice, which is the editing out of context and misquoting people. So in the case of this film, it didn't really matter who our experts were that we feature in the film. In fact, we have one guy who's a cryptozoologist. We've got, actually, that guy didn't make it into the final cut. Well, almost pretty much everyone else is a PhD. Most of them were people that I knew personally or had a connection to. And we already had, years of trust and mutual understanding that we're all on the same page working for the cause of science over pseudoscience. So we didn't have any concerns about that. We had, it's interesting, we had to, in the middle of 2020, the film got kicked back to us because we started hearing, I bet you guys have a pretty good scene about the COVID pandemic, right? And it's like, well, no, we didn't. The film had already been shot and finished by then. So we actually pulled it back out of post and went and shot a new sequence to get someone to discuss some of the false claims about COVID-19. And in that sequence, we criticized the very horrible, angering YouTube conspiracy theory video called Plandemic. And so we ended up having to say all kinds of things about the woman that's in there, because in order to the film featured this former woman scientist who was just an off-the-rails conspiracy theorist. I mean, anyone can become a scientist, and anyone can become a conspiracy theorist. And she was a former scientist who basically got fired and got thrown out of all the boards and everything she had been on, because she was just a loony, basically.
Somewhere she had literally lost it, huh?
So we have to make that clear without calling her a loony. And we have to talk about all these things that she did. Okay, no, she wasn't fired because she, spoke out against Fauci. She was fired for stealing all this equipment out of the lab where she had just been fired from. And
wow.
And now, so the lawyers have to come back to us and they say, okay, we've got to be able to prove that everything you just said is absolutely true. And so, again, there's another rabbit hole that we have to go down of fact checking our own experts. So I don't know how close that may or may not come to answering Ian's question, but
well, it was definitely yeah, I think so too. So like you're doing the feature, it's coming out. I what are you going to do? Like, what's it looking like distribution wise? Like, what are you thinking? Was this going to be screened? Where you're going to, this was going to be run in theaters and what is all that looking like for you now? Because that's got to be frustrating.
As late as 2019, we were definitely planning a limited theatrical release. It's not Iron Man 5, right? It's not something that's going to do $200 million at the box office. So you don't plan a large theatrical release. You plan on a limited theatrical release. But really, 2020 kind of, in many ways, was the final nail in the coffin of the cinema industry. Cinema industry is just not going to come back now. So really, the distribution plan is going to change. That is all going to be up to the distributor. We don't get to make that call ourselves. The distributor takes it. Typically, what happens is they will go out to one of the streaming services now and do an outright sale of the film. And that will usually give them the rights to it for about a year. Once it comes back from that, then it kind of goes out and it goes, kaboom, and appears on Amazon Prime and iTunes and Tubi and all these places where you can rent it or buy it. And then you get kind of ongoing revenue from that for a long time. So
right.
Yeah, it's a multi-stage plan. It covers multiple years. The distributors have to worry about films they released 4 years ago. It's like, okay, this contract is ending this month. What are we going to do with that?
What are we going to do with it? So, hi, Michelle. How you doing? Michelle's in Cleveland and is on here pretty quickly. I'm on here pretty often. Hey, Bernadette is here. You guys definitely chime in with your questions. I think I want to jump back and forth a little bit about this stuff because I want to hold true to I don't want this to be pure clickbait on the title here. You know what I mean?
So legends yet.
Yes. So those are coming up, the craziest urban legends yet. But I had so there's a young woman on here that's just an absolute charm and a wonderful singer. Her name is Serena, and she's been on here a couple of weeks. And there's all kinds of musicians and stuff on here. But we were, we were working out titles when I was ostensibly doing our midday mental health check-in today. We were trying to work out titles with you, and she said, "Well, what's an urban legend?" And I'm like, "Okay." So I just gave her the hitchhiker story. The hitchhiker. I made a version of, there was a car accident scene, and the hitchhiker had, they had just picked the hitchhiker up around the corner, and they were talking to the hitchhiker, and then they saw the hitchhiker, being loaded onto a gurney, clearly in pieces or dead or whatever. And the person then turns to look to the right, and the hitchhiker's gone, and there's usually it's a cute girl or something, right? These stories.
Well, I guess that's a question for me for what's an urban legend.
Right.
So, that would go back to kind of how I got my start in all of this. When I was a little kid, I have the book sitting here. Well, this is not the book I was thinking of, but this is an example of one of the books that filled my bookshelf. It's like this whole series of books. Some of you may recognize this book as being one of a series. There's 15 or 20 of them along the shelf, all about some aspect of paranormal claims, kind of all the weird stuff. Bigfoot, Bermuda Triangle. Those are kind of the big, most famous urban legends. I'm not talking about a Mythbusters type urban legend, like, which is how much dynamite does it take to blow up the body of a shark. This is, these famous stories, ghost stories like the Amityville Horror, strange things like the Bermuda Triangle and Bigfoot and alien visitations and all these famous UFO cases and famous cryptozoology examples. So that's kind of what I was excited about when I was a little kid, as were many of us. And later on in life, I went and ended up going into the sciences, and I still remembered all these great stories that I'd heard as a kid. I said, I want to know what was really going on with that. What's really going on at the Oak Island Money Pit? And I assure you, it's nothing to do with what they tell you on is it History Channel? Whatever network it is.
Yeah, I don't know those, because those History Channels and travel channels and everything, they become strange cryptozoological.
They're all
yeah, there's no history. There's no real history on the History Channel, I think. I mean,
I did an interview once on an event that happened 20, 30 years ago called the Bell Island Boom, this extremely loud explosion that happened over an island off Canada. And, the film crew, they come to my house. We did the interview and everything. I saw that interview over the next few years on at least 3 different TV shows, on at least 2 different networks. So they literally are just kind of recycling all the same material from one another.
Yeah, and that. Go ahead.
I lost my train of thought.
No problem. So the bells, though, quickly, because I listened to that episode, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that one place, those kind of bell sounds have been heard other places, right? It wasn't just exclusive to that, or similar sounds, and then I guess you'll have to you'll have to tell us, I suppose. Though you should go listen to the episode maybe to find. We'll do that too, to go find the conclusion to some of these.
Since we're advertised as talking about the most amazing urban legends, we can certainly talk about some of those specifically. The thing I just mentioned, the Bell Island Boom. Bell was the name of the island.
Oh, that's right. Bell Island Boom. Right.
But there have been other episodes on other famous sounds that you hear, like the hum, which is heard at all kinds of different places around the world. Something called sky trumpets, this horrible trumpet-like sound coming from the heavens. But the Bell Island Boom was a really great story, because something actually happened, which is not the case with so many urban legends. And it ended up having a real science-based explanation, so that when you do learn about it, you've come away with something new and awesome and amazing. The one thing that I never have any interest in doing is debunking. Simply saying, oh, that's probably not true, that didn't happen, There's nothing to be gained from doing that process. However, when there is something real that did happen that's way more interesting than the popular paranormal version of the story, Bermuda Triangle, for example, then you can do episodes like this that are always fun and always a positive learning experience to listen to. I mean, I've learned so much just from doing the show.
Well, go ahead.
In the case of Bell Island, what ended up happening was a very new discovery called a lightning superbolt. It's a special type of lightning that's very rare, that comes from way up high in the atmosphere, and so it doesn't even matter if there's a storm down on the ground. But this lightning superbolt can come down and make a tremendous discharge and do some damage. And that's what happened in this case. And it was only discovered by a couple of scientists who saw it on satellite imagery that was looking for Soviet nuclear tests. And these guys had been just kind of starting to study the phenomenon of lightning superbolts and kind of repurposed these Cold War satellites to see what they could learn from them. And so the story was great in that it had these legitimate men in black who were actually these, dorky short sleeve white shirt and skinny black tie science guys in Los Alamos. They came out to Bell Island and were snooping around asking questions. and then left mysteriously. I mean, that story can be spun to sound, very nefarious, when in fact there was nothing nefarious about it at all. And they got a great point of data, and we learned more about lightning Super Bowls.
Abyss says it's called a Kugelblitz. Am I right?
Oh my gosh. I don't know. I have heard that term, but it's been too long since I worked on that episode, and I couldn't tell you
remember
the story
where it fits in. Yeah, so you know what, this space between you saying, which I 100% believe as well, from your episodes and lots of other things in life, that the actual story can be way more interesting than the myth or the legend. But we can talk about how those myths and legends certainly take root. But I think what I'm also interested is, what do we do? Like, I guess it's like comments online, that first comment that somebody says, X equals 7, and then it actually is 9, but everybody sees 7 and their brain is biased towards the answer being 7, and it's hard to convince them that it's 9. Like, do we have to literally somehow try to get out ahead of all these stories? Like, how do we show people that the truth is the interesting thing, because they've already made up this pretend thing in their mind? So
that's a question that I've struggled with for years and years and years. I mean, I've produced TV pilots trying to find a solution to this, trying to get people interested in finding out what's really going on, rather than just simply accepting the History Channel version of a story because it's sensational and amazing sounding. And what I think you need to do, and I have put thought into this, and I do think I have a couple of different answers. I've always got 2 or 3 TV show pitches on my computer that are always being kept updated and always getting sent out. I think what you need to do is, you can't correct the misinformation. What is it? There's an old saying that a lie makes it around the world 10 times before the truth can even put its shoes on, something to that effect. And when somebody reports something amazing and incredible, 5G will give you cancer, that's the story that gets all around the world. The next day, when an actual scientist said, no, you completely misrepresented what I said in that study, 5G does not give you cancer, nobody cares about the correction issued the next
It doesn't care about ionizing radiation versus non-ionizing radiation, for example. Yeah.
It's the sensational version of the story that makes it around the world that's going to stick in everyone's mind. You can't fix that or make that go away, but what you can do is do it one better. So that's kind of at the heart of what I'm always trying to work on. One of the pitches I'm always keeping updated looks at all of these famous mysteries not from the perspective of what happened. I mean, we just take it for granted that the bullshit version is bullshit. We don't even bother saying that. Instead, focus on the one person who was behind the creation of this legend. Like, for example, if we're talking about the Philadelphia experiment, which was a purely fictional event, and yet so many people believe that in the 1940s, the U.S. Navy tried to make a ship disappear, and it had disastrous results.
And I'm bummed that didn't happen, by the way.
100% fiction, and yet everyone believes it. So, but where there is an interesting story to tell is not in just saying, "Oh, that's fiction; it didn't really happen." And here's the actual records of these ships. We know what they were actually doing on that. That's not as interesting as when you create a news story told from the perspective of the guy who created this. I mean, he was a really weird guy. This guy named Carl Allen, literally living in his parents' basement, had all kinds of things going on. His every room where he was looked like in the movies where there's a conspiracy theorist and it's got the walls are papered in photographs and attached to them, and every inch of the room is covered in scribbled handwriting. That's how this guy actually was. And there's an interesting story to be told about that guy. So you don't try and beat them at their own game. You try and come up with something better.
That's something that at least will catch fire in somebody. Oh, and that's interesting. Hey, hold on a second, because Abyss has a question, but I wanna say this. You've been doing this for what, 10 years as a podcast?
2006 is when the show started. So
oh gosh. So
15th year right now.
Say it again, you're at what?
This is our 15th year.
Oh, 15th year. So, okay. So you have some young kids probably that started listening to the show when they were 10 or 15. And now they're like 25 or 30. And I bet you've influenced their lives, right? I bet they've come to you and said, hey, Brian, you set me on this course for being a scientist or something, right? I mean, tell me about some of those stories as a side.
I was amazed when that happens. It's like a guy who's a PhD will come up to me and say, listening to Skeptoid is what inspired me to go into the sciences when I was in middle school. I'll go, no way. There's no way I can go.
Oh, you mean when I had hair, you were in middle school?
But my favorite, I don't mean my favorite, because this is a kind of a shaky story, but I'm not going to give a name, so don't ask. There is a scientist who is currently disgraced and kind of had to leave the sciences, who was doing great work before they sort of didn't. And became a scientist, went into the sciences because of Skeptoid. And I had met this person at conferences, and they had told me this, that I believe they were like a first-year college student with an undeclared major, and got so inspired by stuff from Skeptoid that they went into the sciences, had a great career, some public appearances, and then entered a scandal and are now out of it.
And then entered the bell tower, and it was like, oh, yes, Brian Dunning's best friend.
Right?
His mentor, he mentored, this guy.
They did into that stick.
Let's jump into
I do see some great questions going.
Yeah. I was going to say, anytime you want to talk speak to the questions, please do, Brian, and just scroll yourself back a little bit. And go ahead. You're catching on. This is the fun part.
Okay. So I joined late. Forgive me. What's the name of the podcast? Great question, Michelle. It's called Skeptoid, Skeptoid, which is a terrible title, but that's what
It's what you had at the time.
The problem with the whole word skeptic and every form of skepticism, it's a very problematic term, and I really wish I'd never associated the podcast with it. People hear it and they say, oh, skeptics, you're the people who think 9/11 was an inside job, or
oh, wow.
whatever it is, or
right.
You're the people who doubt global warming, right? That's even more common. So it's a problematic term. Of course, skepticism is really simply about having a bar for the quality of evidence that you accept, having a standard of evidence that you apply to stories. Someone comes up and tells me, I have a magical cure for cancer. The skeptical response is, I'm going to assume that you don't, unless that can be proven. So that's having a standard for evidence rather than simply accepting everything that pop culture throws at us. Something that's going on right now is these stupid glasses intended to prevent eye strain when you're working at your computer screen, because they block UV. Some of them are tinted yellow, a lot of them are clear, but they say they block the blue light from your monitor, and that protects your eyes. It is 100% false and a scam. They provide no benefit to anyone whatsoever. In fact, every ophthalmologic you know what I'm trying to say.
I do, dude, and I know how tired you are because I know how hard you work.
Ophthalmologic association on the planet has white papers saying these claims are all false. These glasses don't do anything at all. And so that's the kind of thing that people simply accept because here's a product that someone is trying to sell them. They say, oh, therefore it must work. And, people don't really have the background or the chops to say, okay, how do I go about assessing that? Well, science perspective.
And here's a thing right here that, again, this is another one of these, where you're sitting at the edge here. So I really like the guy that, I won't mention any names or the store or anything, but I really like the guy that sells me my glasses. You know what I mean? He's a great guy. I like him a lot. And I support his business and everything. And when I was in there getting my glasses, one of their package options was to give me that blue magic in my prescription glasses. Now, like, granted, I have the trifocals, the fancy ones and everything, and I got the tint and all that in there, and I'd saved up money to get a nice pair of glasses, and I'm just like, they did everything so professionally from end to end. It was a fantastic operation that they did to give me my glasses, but they offered me something that was pure bunk, and it really leaves a stain in my mind of like, so do I trust you for everything else? Because this one I happen to know was bunk, and maybe they don't even know it's bunk, but that, the credibility factor is, people need to, you would think a business would check that out,
You bring up a point that's very, very nuanced. I find in my experience that very few people are out there being consciously deceptive.
Mm-hmm.
And my default starting point is that your doctor believes he's offering something of value to you by selling that. Now, computer monitors, and that includes televisions, monitors, iPhones, tablets, whatever, anything with an LCD, LED, OLED screen, they produce zero UV radiation.
Yeah. I get my suntan from my LED monitor.
But
yeah.
Why would an eye doctor happen to know anything more about the technology of a computer monitor than anyone else on the street?
Right. Because it's totally irrelevant. There would be no need to know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's a rabbit hole we can go down, but
yeah, that is. Well, no, and actually, that I like that, because we're in social media, and that is a little bit of a rabbit hole that somebody tried to take you down in some tweet comments today, with a comment back, right? And somebody defended you and made another good comment, which is great. But let's talk about that for a little bit too. So, what do we have in Skeptoid and the internet, or not, some of those things, but and also I just want to know, like, how have things changed so if we're not going to call you a skeptical, you have these skeptical communicators, but what do you think that how has being a skeptic changed because of the internet too? All right, that was a lot, but hopefully you heard some of it.
I know what you're saying. Well, I mean, I'm a member of the National Association of Science Writers, so I call myself a science writer when anyone asks.
Awesome. Science writer. Good. I can do that now.
But it's a common question is, how has the internet made it easier or more difficult for the people selling nonsense, for the charlatans? Has it made it better or harder for them? Or for the skeptics, has it made it easier or harder for the skeptics to get their message out? And I hear arguments about this both ways, because anyone can go on the internet and you've got all the information in the world right at your fingertips. And you've also got all the misinformation in the world right at your fingertips, in many cases closer. I take the neutral perspective on this. Kind of in the same idea that a rising tide raises all boats equally. The internet makes it easier to find good stuff and makes it easier to find bad stuff. So I don't believe it has benefited one side or the other. And by sides, I mean those people who are trying to profit off of misinformation, and then everyone else. So all of the rest of us.
That's interesting, because I think I really liked I like that too about you, and because I've had these personal, one-on-one sessions with you as we're working things through on Clubhouse, to get a following and figuring out how to do all that. And we've been going back and forth in email and all this fun stuff. But I like that I've learned that about you, because I really kind of, in my mind, and again, you could speak to it, but I think of some of the skeptics out there, and there's great skeptics out there, but I think of some of them as almost like they are atheists versus agnostics, right? It's kind of like, you and I both really would like to have a UFO land. I mean, if it were landing in my street, I'd run out there right now and be like, hey, what do you do? Hi, let's go for a ride. I mean, it would be the coolest thing ever. But we don't know. We can't prove that they don't exist. I can't tell anybody, oh, there's no alien life out there. It's not possible. I can never say that. So I can only be agnostic in it, right? I mean, is that kind of your different approach to skepticism? Because I think you have a different approach. than other people.
I mean, yeah, I'm not. First of all, there has historically always been kind of this confusion, simultaneously confusion between and a rift between skepticism and atheism.
Yes, right.
The way that I look at that question is skepticism is a process, atheism is a conclusion. Skepticism may lead you to make a conclusion founded in atheism, but there are plenty of atheists who are not skeptics. Bill Maher, for example, is an extremely outspoken atheist, and he believes every other bit of bullshit.
Yeah. He's got the blue blockers, the magnetic thing, and knowing Bill Maher, since it's after 9:00 here in Chicago, he's probably got something wrapped around his testicles to make them perform better that's made out of magnets or something,
I've got a clean tagged show, so I can't say that.
Oh, sorry.
Anyway, I see them as different topics. I don't advocate for atheism on my show any more than I would advocate for any other position. Instead, I try to advocate. I'm not always successful, maybe, but I try to advocate for the process, because when you can teach a position to someone, but it's better to teach them a process so that they can find all of their own positions going forward and hopefully do a better job of it. So that's my focus, at least in my attempt.
Awesome. You can pick a couple questions out of there. I'm going to jump to, go ahead and pick a couple out of the.
Here's one from Frank. I'm kind of going bottom to top here, so I apologize for the people who may have posted a question earlier. I'm trying to get up to you. Brian, do you divorce yourself from the ramifications of being wrong when it perpetuates a perilous outcome? Do you rethink your direction post fake news? Fake news, first of all, I don't believe that there is anything more fake news now than there ever has been. A lot of my job involves going to newspapers that are 100 years old, 200 years old. And believe me, there was no better accuracy in newspapers then than there is now. There's more accountability now than there used to be. So if anything, it's harder to get away with actual fake news. And I think even the fake news term is misused a lot. There's a lot of opinion rolled around news, and opinions aren't necessarily wrong, even though you may disagree with them. I find it hard to call that fake news. And everyone puts their spin on everything. But I look at fake news as when you deliberately make up something that you know to be false and put it out there. Tucker Carlson and Rush Limbaugh believed everything they said. I would not describe that as fake news, for example. However, if they knowingly said something that was false, if they did a Kellyanne Conway and got up there and just parroted lies that she knew or had been written down 4 or 5 minutes before by someone who made them up out of the thin air, that's fake news. So I think it's less common than other people do. But let me not get too far off track. Do I divorce myself from the ramifications of being wrong when it perpetuates a perilous outcome? So if I were to announce on my podcast that, hey, it turns out the science says that essence of seaweed will cure COVID-19, so you should all take that. And then everyone did, and then they all died because they were essentially untreated. Frank, I'm guessing that's the kind of situation you're referring to. So no, I would not. I would take responsibility for that. And there's really two parts to my answer to that question. First of all, I go to a hell of a long way to make sure that I'm not wrong first. This is a science show. It's not Brian's opinion show. I report stuff all the time that goes against my opinion, that goes against my preconceived notions. It's not about me and what I think. It's me surveying the academic literature and finding out what's real. What is the mainstream view? What is it that most scientists accept? That's what I will report. Makes no difference what I think. So number one, I'm going to be wrong not very often. It does happen. And when it does happen, that's the second part of my answer. I issue a corrections episode. About every 20, 25 episodes, maybe, there is a show that's devoted exclusively to corrections in past episodes.
I love the corrections episodes because that's the way science works. Like, we just found out you're wrong, dude, and you're telling us you're wrong, and that's okay. You know, like, I love those. They're fun to listen to. Seriously, you got to listen to Skeptoid. You got to listen to the podcast. It's awesome. What are they? 15 minutes now, right?
They're supposed to be 12 to 14.
Yeah.
There's the free public show has a couple of ads in it, so it might run a little longer, 16, 17. But
and Eleanor, put Skeptoid. Would you please put skeptoid.com in there? Put Brian's at Brian Dunning on Twitter and at Skeptoid. Maybe put some of that stuff in there for us, because a lot of people are going to watch this replay. That's one of the nice things about this platform is people actually watch the replays. So there'll be a lot of people. This will stay here. It'll be here for a long time. And so I want to kind of tell everybody, if you're watching, you've been watching, I cannot believe 53 minutes have gone by already. The time has just flown by. You're watching Haps TV. My name is Revolution McKinnis. This is the science writer, Brian Dunning. And, it's hard, Brian, to not be a fanboy. You know what I mean? And I'm telling it to you straight here. I've had, some really fun interviews and some really interesting people, but I'm fanboying all over this, because I really love your work, and I love what you do, and I love your educational stuff. So this is a really proud moment for me to have you here.
That's extremely generous of you to say thank you. But I would hope that the reason is because my own enthusiasm for the material is what wears off. It is just the awesomeness of our world and the way that science lets us look at it. So
that's true. Go ahead.
We're burning a lot of time. Let me try and go faster through some of these questions here.
Yeah,
this is really good. Abyss asked,
and we're not solid at 1 hour. If you can stay a few minutes, it's totally up to you. Don't worry about that.
What would I have any work appointments this late at night? No.
Yeah, whatever you want. Good. All right, excellent. Yeah, great.
How do you eschew confrontation when pitted against people who perpetuate misinformation and remain to be obstinate when confronted with the science-backed truth? We had a guy like that last night on Clubhouse. Remember the guy who was...
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Science explanation. That applies to everyone else who had my experience, but not me. My experience actually was paranormal, and the best reason he could come up with was because he was CEO of a company or something, and therefore...
he had credibility in the strange story department.
So... Abyss, the answer to that question is, first of all, Skeptoid is not about confronting people and arguing with people. A question that I'll often get, almost every day, someone will email me or tweet me or something, and they say, hey, my grandma is into astrology. Have you done an episode on that so that I can play it for her and, cure her of that? And I always say, no, don't. Yes, I do have that episode, but don't play that one for her. Never open by directly challenging something that's important to somebody.
Right.
They're going to cut you off. They're not going to want to hear anything else you have to say. They're sure as hell not ever going to listen to Skeptoid again. Instead, play for her a couple of episodes about something that that you and she are both likely to agree with. Pick one of these fun mystery stories. Pick the Jack the Ripper story. Something that's interesting and historical, and maybe everyone can enjoy together. And when these people begin to appreciate the process of how and why we learn to find out what's true, then they're much more receptive to the episode that talks about the belief that is particular cherished belief to them. So I always try to discourage and avoid the confrontation, because that's a terrible way to change anyone's mind.
And I think that's just a great. I think that's a great philosophy too, just to don't, to not confront in a lot of situations like that, because I definitely, we've seen it. I know you've seen it, where somebody is like, yeah, that whole thing about the magnets, wearing them on your wrist and that's going to help you have energy. That's total BS. But the blue blocker sunglasses I have on here, that's gospel. That's real.
We all have our blind spots. That's actually another important point. That there are things that I believe right now that are false. I don't know what they are, and I wish I did, but there's things you believe that are false. All of us have some false beliefs, and how few of us are willing to admit that. Being open-minded starts with acknowledging that you're wrong, maybe not about this, but about some other things.
Yeah. Talk to the executive producer. That's what I call my wife. I'm wrong a lot.
Someone, Ian mentioned the Oak Island money pit. Should we just kind of spill the beans and tell
Go through. Yeah, have fun.
I really wish I could have some of that money.
Pardon?
I wish I could have some of the money they put into digging the pit.
Oh, you're not kidding. That's a big part of the story.
Good one, Eleanor.
I think 6 people have died on the island looking for
Oh, gosh.
This goes all the way back to 1795, a long time ago. And there was a little kid rowing his rowboat, and he landed on the island, and he walked around, and he saw, according to legend, this is most likely not true, but he saw a block and tackle, like from a ship, hanging from the limb of a tree, and there was a depression on the ground under it. And so he figured, someone must have dug a pit there and used the block and tackle to lower treasure into it. He started digging. His brother started coming digging with him. Their neighbor started digging with him. A guy who was a miner bought them out. Someone else who was a miner bought him out. And by 100 years ago, the entire area had been dug all the way down to bedrock by steam shovel. And there's no one has any idea where the original money pit actually was. But it's described in pretty good detail. And what you're sure as hell not going to hear mentioned on the History Channel show is that there are other pits exactly like it all around the region, because it's geology. It's not pirates, it's geology. So the bedrock there is, I believe it's karst. My son is a geologist, and he does all my
wow
on the shows. But above that is this very porous limestone. And what happens in limestone is we get sinkholes. I mean, we see sinkholes in limestone on the TV news all the time. And if you're on a very low-lying island like this, and there's a sinkhole, every time a storm comes washing by, you're going to get things washed into that hole, such as logs and coconuts that came all the way up from the Caribbean. So that's why there was coconut fiber reported buried 50 feet down in this hole.
Weird.
When they say we came upon a wall of oak planks that were sealed with coconut fiber, you can see this kind of thing. Even today, I've watched a couple of episodes of the show, but even today, if you watch the TV show, and they'll get out there with a backhoe and start digging in some other random place on the island, just so it looks like they're digging for something. Look at what the backhoe hauls up. It hauls up all this debris that's got all these big logs tangled into it. That's all just more of this storm debris that has landed on this island over the years. So the money pit was just that. It was just all of this debris filling in this hole. And at another point on the island, another sinkhole opened up on the same island when a guy was plowing a little farm plot that he had, and his ox fell into the hole. Right across the bay from it, someone reported another one that looked exactly like the original descriptions, and the area's geologists came out and said, yep, that's a sinkhole, just like we've got all over the place here. So geologically, from a whole perspective, that's what's going on at Oak Island. That's the only thing that was ever there. From the perspective, and this is even more interesting to me, excuse me, from the perspective of, you've heard them mention, if you've watched the TV show or just heard the legend, you've heard them mention that, we found a link of gold chain, and we found this stone that had this mysterious inscription carved on it that was code for $1 million are buried 20 feet down, so whatever it was. So there's all these little bits and scraps of valuables that were found in the pit. So how do we explain that? Well, we don't really need to, because since the dawn of time, salting a mine has been a fundamental of the business of mining. Salting a mine is when you've got a mine that you need more investment. You need people to throw more money at you so you can hire some more workers, buy some more shovels, whatever it is that you need to do to continue your mining. You want your investors to think your mine is valuable. So what they would do in the gold rush in Virginia City and Sacramento and everything, They would take valuable ore from another mine, throw it on top of their pile of ore, and say, hey, look what they're digging out of our mine right now. If you're trying to induce people to invest in your dig because you think Blackbeard buried his pirate treasure there, you're going to take a little link of gold chain, toss it in, and say, look what we just found. So salting a mine is something that absolutely would have been part of the history of this dig on Oak Island. Whether that explains any of the specific finds or not, I don't make any claim, because of course we can't know that. But I will say that there was enough times when this mine changed hands and different mining companies bought the island or bought the claim that was on it, that this absolutely would have happened. So none of that is very surprising. And it all checks all the boxes and fits very nicely with what we know of geology and what we know of the history of mining. So there's Oak Island for you in a nutshell.
Yeah, and Ian says, wow, I've literally never heard this explanation. I love it. Yeah, this is why. There's
nothing to be gained in the History Channel telling you.
Yeah, they'd lose their show. It'd be over.
Yeah. But
we discovered it's not true.
This is the kind of stuff that you can look up. You know, the whole subject of access to academic literature is a big subject. I have paid accounts with like all of these services so that I can go look something up whenever I need anything.
You ever notice the island does look like an elephant, though?
I never noticed that.
Just look at it one time. It looks kind of like an elephant.
I'm sure that proves something.
Elephants buried the treasure, of course. I mean...
Okay, let's see. Let me run down the question list here, see if we've missed anything.
Thanks, Frank. I've been getting really good at booking, but I have to attribute Mr. Dunning here to somebody else connecting us and him being just awesome and letting me be on his show. Oh, and while I'm thinking about it, what are we talking about next week on Clubhouse? Do you know yet?
I have not put any thought into it. I mean, the thing we've been doing so far, I feel that's been working out pretty well.
I do. We just got to be able to get more people to, ping more people.
What we've been doing, for those who'd like to know, is it's just been people come up on stage in Clubhouse. That's how it works. We're up on stage. I usually bring some of my other science communicator friends up there, and then people raise their hands. We invite them up, and they tell us their weird experience. What strange paranormal seeming thing happened to them? Did they see a ghost or a UFO or something unexplainable? Tell us what happened, and we will take our crack at telling you what we know of how the science might be able to explain your experience. I think it's been fun.
I think it's been very fun. And we'll go back to the comments, but I'm going to circle all the way back to the beginning with that guy that would refuse to listen, refuse to accept that what he saw wasn't real. And I remember him saying at some point that if my brother hadn't seen it, I would have definitely debunked it, wouldn't have believed it or whatever. And all he really needed to think about was, we know how faulty memory is. We know how easily the one brother could have said he saw something. The other brother doesn't remember him saying he saw something and repeated it, whatever. You can come up with all these little different paths. But if he'd only been open to his own point and sat there and thought and be like, oh, you know what? We were both pretty young. Maybe it didn't happen exactly the way I remember. He wouldn't be a believer.
Yeah. His experience, I assume there's minimal crossover between who's in the room now and who was there last night. His experience, the way he described it, was an absolute perfect textbook example of what's called sleep paralysis, where you wake up at some point during the night, but you don't completely wake up. You're conscious. This is rare, and it doesn't happen, and most people will never have the experience, but it's very common for some people. Your eyes are open, you're conscious, but your body is still asleep. You cannot move. And you often feel a weight pushing you down, often on your chest. And in many cases, it's associated with visual, auditory, tactile hallucinations, even olfactory hallucinations in some cases. And this has explained this is what the old hag comes from. The old hag, you wake up feeling haggard in the morning because you didn't sleep well, because the old hag rode you last night. This was
wow.
people would wake up in the middle of the night and there's an old hag literally sitting on their chest and they can't move and they can't call out. And a fascinating, not to get too far afield, but a fascinating aspect of sleep paralysis is that the character reported sitting on you varies by culture and by time period.
Exactly. I was going to say that. Yeah.
That's crazy.
So that's a great piece of evidence that this is something coming from in the mind of the people. It's coming from their particular culture. We had the old hag in the United States. In India, it was a character called, oh my gosh, it was a beautiful woman was sitting on you.
I like that one better.
I know. In Slavic cultures, it's a little old man who has like a little elf sort of thing. And after about 1965, that character changed because American culture was changing, and it was no longer the old hag. Now it's the gray alien.
Oh, I like that. I like that. So
episodes of sleep paralysis explain probably a huge number of nighttime nocturnal assaults, they're called, where the aliens come into your room and abduct you. Anyway, what this guy described was a textbook sleep paralysis case, with the little creature was clung to him, and somehow he said he was 7 years old at the time, right? And his brother was 9, and I think they had another friend who was in the room, and they all woke up kind of, oh my gosh, panicking or whatever, as he remembers it today. And for years, his brother has been saying exactly the same thing. Yes, there was a creature on you. Now, for 7-year-old boys to wake up in the middle of the night and one guy says, there's a creature on me, startling everyone out of their sleep. And of course, their stories are going to cross-contaminate. They all woke up scared, and someone filled in the gaps with what happened during that moment, and they all just accept, wow, I guess that's what happened because my friend just told me so, or my brother just told me so. So, of course, after years and years and years of sharing the same story back and forth, of course, they're all going to have the same story. So that's whether maybe there actually was a monster sitting on this guy that night. Maybe his brother actually did see it. However, that exact same experience is what we expect is going to happen simply because of the normal human phenomenon of sleep paralysis.
Well, yeah, and I think that's so interesting, the cultural thing, because I know, like there used to be, and by the way, Brian, just because, there's no, we're all family on this thing. I just sent you a message and you can see it in kind of the magenta color. You see that in the messages?
I'm getting that right now. Actually, I'm taking care of that.
No, that's okay. That's okay. But no, he can answer. But I just wanted you to know we can communicate to each other through there. So, but you have to have the little lock on there. But anyway, so
search my name, Brian Dunning, and I'm just at Brian Dunning on Clubhouse. So
exactly. There you go. So you have fairies that were very popular. Probably for hundreds of years. In Normandy, these places in Europe and all these things. And then those fairies morphed into something else, and that something else then morphed into the gray aliens. And I mean, it's just fascinating that all these different cultures have some predominant character that, gets into their life, and then it can change. I just think that's cool. It's so evident that what is happening, but of course, people can't see it.
Hang on one second.
No worries.
Great question here, and I'm looking this up on my website.
Oh, awesome. Good. So, what if the creature was my favorite Labrador licking my face? Okay.
I know, right?
Yeah.
So Frank asked, and this is a great question. It's a very common question. And now my browser is out of the way. There it is. Can you give an example of something you've proven your own skepticism to be intuitively wrong? In other words, where your investigations led you to eat crow. So what are the things that surprised me and that I found that I was wrong about? First of all, I think it's important to establish that I never start a show from the perspective of what I personally think is true unless I find something that contradicts that. I start with a blank slate, and I go to the literature and I start reporting what's in the literature, and it's just the process of constructing an episode just doesn't include me putting down what my personal opinion is on something. So that doesn't really happen. However, the question remains, what are some episodes where the conclusion turned out to be something totally different from what I thought? Because that does happen. I've got opinions on everything like anyone else. And once I learn what's actually going on, it may be completely different from what I thought. So I've got a bunch of these. In fact, I did a 2-part episode called How to Surprise a Skeptical Podcaster, part 1 and 2. These are from 2017. You can find them on the website, skeptoid.com. But here was one, Flight 19. Flight 19, the case of the 5 aircraft that mysteriously disappeared in the Bermuda Triangle, right?
Oh, very famous.
Supposedly their compasses went crazy and they got lost and they couldn't find their way. And everything was weird, and they ran out of fuel and ditched in the ocean and were lost. So I won't say that I had an opinion on that. I just literally had no freaking clue. That's a story I'd heard about my entire life, as have many of us, and I just had no idea what the explanation was, because it did seem to me to be improbable. Well, we have a very good explanation. The Navy has always had a very good explanation, and there was never the slightest mystery about it. That is surprise number 1. The mystery was created by this author, Charles Berlitz, who's more or less the originator of the whole Bermuda Triangle mythology. And he took this actual event, omitted the explanation, and made up his own, all the facts about compasses and everything, and the radio communication. He made all of that up. It's all pure fiction. What actually happened with Flight 19 was it was a training flight from this training base. And the guy who was the instructor, the flight leader, had been in the Pacific Theater as a fighter pilot during World War II. And twice during World War II, he got lost and ditched at sea and was rescued both times. This guy was the most unaccountably bad navigator the world has ever seen.
But he's the leader.
And he's now the flight instructor. So the Navy, of course, has the actual radio communication, and you can read it. It's on Navy.mil. Somewhere they've got a Navy history website, and you can read stories like this and find out what's actually going on. They were east of Florida, so over the Atlantic Ocean, and somehow this guy believed that they were west of Florida.
So wait, they went all the way over. They're over the Gulf.
He believed they were over the Gulf on the other side of the Florida Panhandle when they were actually over the Atlantic. His students were telling him this on the radio constantly. They were telling him, "You are wrong. We are east of Florida. We are not west of Florida." So no, I'm sure we're to the west. All we need to do is keep flying further east, and we'll get to Florida. It's as simple as that. This guy was just a horrible, horrible navigator, which is unaccountable, and it's tragic. But that's all that happened.
Yeah, and so so Frank Berlitz, what did he write? Chariots? That's not Chariots of the Gods. That's somebody else. Or
that's
Von Daniken. Yeah. Okay. Oh, well, we'll be careful. We might open that can of worms too. But but Frank Berlitz, is there some kind of apocryphal? Is there an actual Bermuda Triangle story that somebody else had kind of started, or do we think that he may have actually created the Bermuda Triangle himself?
Yeah. No, he didn't. He didn't create it. He popularized it.
Okay.
It had been put out there by one or two other paranormal authors before him. Among them, Ivan Sanderson, who is best known for being a Bigfoot hunter, but he was also a sort of New Age character. And he in fact, is the guy who invented the whole idea of ley lines, these sort of lines of energy going around the world. And pyramids and Stonehenge are on the same ley line. So
do they
completely fictional concept that this guy...
Do they lead to a money pit? Because I'd like to follow them. I could use some cash.
I bet Oak Island is on a ley line. So
It probably is. It probably is on a ley line. Answer some questions in there, and then I'm going to tell you my quick Bigfoot story.
okay. Let me give one more to Frank here. This is a better one, where the fringe explanation that I would have poo-pooed turned out to be the true one. So this was suggested to me at one of our Skeptics in the Pub nights. This guy starts telling me this story. I was fascinated. I'd never heard about it before. It's about numbers stations on shortwave radio. Now, this is not so much the case anymore. The last 10 years, it's pretty much gone out of fashion. But until then, that's still pretty recently, if you took a shortwave radio and tuned it to a certain station at a certain time of day on a certain day of the week, you would hear this regular broadcast that came out every week at the same time. And there was a bunch of these being transmitted from all around the world on all these different stations at all these different times. There was a huge subculture of people who believed that this was some nefarious conspiracy theory. These were the Illuminati communicating in code, whatever it was that they believed. And what these recordings were on the radio stations was just an automated voice reading out strings of numbers, 5 digits at a time. It would repeat the 5 digits, then it would go to the next block of 5 digits, repeat those, go to the next, and it might do it for 5 minutes, it might do it for 5 hours. Now, for anyone who recognizes cryptography, you know that by convention, the numbers are written in blocks of 5. No other reason than just convention for that. So this guy who was telling me about this was a dyed-in-the-wool conspiracy theorist. He believed that it was everything evil was going on with these. I looked into it a little bit. I saw what people were talking about, and there was explanations like, well, oceanographic research buoys transmit their data in a way similar to this. I'm going, okay, well, that's reasonable, or weather stations or something like that. Okay, so there's probably plausible explanations that don't require us to dive down the conspiracy theory web hole. Well, here's the way most of the world found out the solution for what number stations really were. And it's wild and crazy. Does anyone remember a date in history, September 11th, 2001?
Indeed, yeah.
Do you remember what happened on that day?
September 11th, 2001?
Yes.
Yeah, the attack on the World Trade Center.
So that's one thing that happened on that day, and it tended to take up all the pages of all the newspapers. So if there's something else that might have happened on that day, likely nobody ever heard of it.
Right.
And what happened was a whole bunch of arrests were made inside the Pentagon because they just busted a ring of Cuban spies. I believe they were called the WASP network of Cuban spies. And the evidence against them is that they were taking their Pentagon-issued laptop computers, typing in the numbers that came over the numbers station from Cuba, and decrypting it with their laptop with a special Cuban program they had. These were actual Cuban spies receiving instructions from Cuba. And
wow.
That turned out to be the first of quite a few arrests all around the world over the next several years for spies who were arrested, and the evidence was that they were listening to these numbers stations and typing the numbers into their laptop and getting their encrypted instructions from their government. So the tinfoil hat explanation for number stations turned out to be exactly, absolutely, perfectly true.
Wow.
And that surprised me. And that's probably my favorite.
That's crazy.
Of something
that's awesome. Yeah, that's really awesome.
Yeah.
I really like that. Bernadette says, well, Bernadette has one, but I'm going to tell my quick Bigfoot story because to me the Bigfoot story is not that interesting, but the way that the Bigfoot sighting, is brought into my head. So my next door neighbor, when I was a kid growing up in New York, in Westchester County, he was a writer. In fact, his name is Bob Foley, and he was in the kitchen when Bobby Kennedy was killed by Sirhan, right?
Oh,
I mean,
wow.
yeah. So, he's a newspaper guy, right? And neat to have a newspaper man, next to you, especially back when people read newspapers. But there was a Bigfoot footprint sighting, that was when, like the streak was popular in the 70s, Bigfoot sightings, finding Bigfoot feet prints was big in the 80s and all of that kind of stuff. So there, and somebody had taken a picture and they had gotten it in, in the local paper, and Bob, doubted, very much that this was legit. So, but by the time he was trying to tell the kids in the neighborhood, why this probably wasn't true, my mind was already locked in, because across the street from our house was called Lockwood Mansion, and our road was called Lockwood, and the Lockwoods had been there since like 1754. It was just all this land, so it was perfect Bigfoot territory. Now, actually, it wasn't, because I don't think a Bigfoot could sustain itself, eat enough, because they're pretty big, from the Lockwood Mansion. But one night in the summer, must have been about 3 a.m. Somehow I was magically awoken. I magically awoke, and I, for some reason, went out and looked out my window at just the right time. And there's a break in the trees, because it's literally like forest. It's woods across the street from where we live. And there's like a break in the trees where it clears, and a Bigfoot ran through the break along the road and into the trees, like exactly like the way the Bigfoot runs in the movie. You know what I mean? Like, I woke up half in a dream, and I mean, I was positive. I woke my parents up. I just saw Bigfoot run through that thing. I was convinced. I'm still convinced to this day that I saw Bigfoot. I know I didn't, but I mean, all those things kind of conspired to put Bigfoot in front of me.
That's a wonderful story and a wonderful experience to have. I told my story on Clubhouse a few weeks ago, I think, where when I was about 10, I woke up in the morning and there was a bunch of Muppet type characters in the tree in my backyard singing a song and putting on a whole musical production for me. And it was absolutely real. And I was up physically walking around checking it out, because I was writing down some of the things on a piece of paper while I was doing it. And that piece of paper was real. It had all the stuff that I wrote down on it. So I was actually walking around fully conscious, having a full-on 100% real hallucination about these characters putting on this whole song and dance musical program for me. And the fact that I had that experience, and it really taught me in a dramatic way the power of our brain to fool us. People don't give brains nearly enough credit for what they can do. It was,
oh my gosh,
it was astonishing. And to this day, I'm just so delighted that I'm lucky enough to have had that experience.
It would be fun sometime if you came back and we just did, like, we could do other things too, but did like that, the whole thing about the brain and how that, how that works, and have people do their brain stories like that, when you realize it, because I'm so fascinated just by the fact that the brain projects the future a millisecond into the future for us, so that we can go through life, and that everything I'm seeing, isn't real, and that what you might think is green, I think of as blue, and, we could just have so much fun with those kind of things.
One of the live shows that I do is called Your Brain Sucks. And for an hour, I bring groups of people from the audience up on stage, and I put them through all of these experiments. And the idea is I make everyone in the room, I make their brains fail, a dozen times over the course of the evening. Starting with this one, after I've been talking for 5 minutes, I say, what color tie am I wearing? Right?
Uh-huh.
And 2/3 of the room gets it wrong. And, as you probably
You're not wearing a tie
now, but you just go from there. And it's not just things like that. We can do one right here for the people who are in the room. This is a really simple one, requires no preparation or materials or anything like that, and we don't have to all be in the same room for this to work. But imagine being outside at night when there's a full moon, and you see the full moon up in the sky, and you put your hand out at arm's length, and you hold your fingers apart at just the size of the full moon. Like, if that's the full moon, this ball of clay, you're doing like that. How big is the circle of the full moon going to look? Held at arm's length, what common object will match the size of the full moon? And I'm going to give you some multiple choices.
Okay.
Start with a BB, like a little tiny.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. A tiny ball bearing, like from a BB gun.
How about a P? or a dime, or a quarter, or a golf ball, or a tennis ball,
What is
or a softball, or a frisbee?
Ooh, I knew you were going to say
Held out at
frisbee.
arm's length. Which of those objects is going to most closely match the size of the full moon?
I'm going to say
where the moon is?
No, makes
no. The
difference.
moon is always the same relative size, right? So
the moon, its orbit is elliptical, but it's well within the error range of the size of those objects.
right. So my first thing was going to be a quarter. I would think
A quarter. That's a common one.
Yeah. That's what I feel. It feels to me like I could hold a quarter up there and it would work.
Well, let's go. Fingers.
Nickel, says Frank.
Basically, the most common answers are quarter and golf ball.
Quarter and golf ball.
That sounds about right. And if you go out there and you look at the moon, I don't know if it happens to be a full moon tonight, but someone says a P. The correct answer is a dime. Oh, I'm sorry. I just spoke wrong because I was reading Frank's answer. P is correct. A
P.
A little tiny green pea is correct. And you think, no way, that's way too small. So next time you're out there, hold your fingers apart about as far apart as a pea and put it up to the full moon, and you will be surprised that the moon is actually that small.
I can actually, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, if I think about it, it actually makes sense. I mean, I'm going to try it with my 7-year-old, but I actually can kind of gauge that now in my mind that probably a P would work.
Abyss, yes, it does depend on your arm length, but again, the difference is going to be relatively small compared to the difference in sizes of these objects. So the thing that's interesting about that is how many times in our life have we seen the full moon? Thousands of times.
Thousands, yeah.
Full moon, and yet we can all be that wrong about it. We
and
think it's 4 to 6 times the size that it is.
That's right. That's really wrong.
That is staggering perceptual error. Here's another one that I do. I can't really do this very well, but if anyone wants to try and do this, if you've got a piece of paper on your desk or something you can draw with of anything, draw 2 circles. Let's see. Here it is. Poster.
Any certain size or anything?
About like that big, about that far apart. Okay. And then here's the exercise. Draw the rest of the bicycle. And what you're going to find is no matter how many times in your life you have seen a bicycle, you will have no idea what the basic shape of a bicycle's frame is. This one actually doesn't work as well as it did just a few years ago because bikes have changed a lot. There's no more conventional bike frames being sold. They're all weird mountain bikes with funky looking frames and new shapes and designs. But conventional bicycles, like think of an old 10-speed or the Schwinn Stingray, you will find that you have no idea what a bike looks like. And when we do this on stage, we have people come up and they draw it on a board, or they'll draw it on their phone and we project it up on a screen. We can compare them. And it's always a moment of great hilarity because some of the pictures are so bad. It's terrible, but we make fun of the artists and we laugh at them. And
I got to tell you, Brian, that this is not great, but I haven't finished, but wait, can we see? Let me move my mic. Am I going the right way? It's down there at the bottom. But I gotta tell you, Brian, I rode my bicycle from May till October. It's right around it's in the laundry room over here. I rode that bicycle 2,200 miles. I know that bike like the back of my hand, and I can't exactly visualize exactly I know what the frame looks like. Yeah. I could go out there. I know what it looks like, but I can't quite put it together.
The thing is that this is not something you'd have to be an artist to do well. We're not interested in a bike that looks good. We're just interested in getting just the basic lines. And no matter how many times we've seen it, we have no idea what it looks like. But let me give just one more example from my talk, Your Brain Sucks, available now for your corporate event, BrianDunning.com.
Exactly, briandunning.com. And I want to tell you, if you guys like have you probably do like the superintendent brings people in and you do stuff for the teachers and stuff like that, right? Different lectures. So yeah.
Sure.
Hit up,
Yeah.
get Brian going, and I bet he does one heck of a Zoom version too now.
It's great for continuing education because a lot of professions are required to do continuing education. Everyone hates it, and so they're all very grateful for the chance to have something fun to do.
Oh, you can get CEUs or whatever. You can get continuing education credits. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Oh wow, cool.
For some industries, you have to jump through a bunch of hoops to get approved for various industries. But anyway, here's the cool thing. Here, this is my favorite one to do. It's hard to pull off, but I'll bring 4 people up onto the stage, and I will ask each of the 4. I have a question. Each of the 4 people gives me their answer. I go through about 8 questions, and the questions are very simple perceptual questions. And perceptual, it's like, what do you perceive as the difference between this and this? And it's, what's bigger, a novel or a deck of cards? Or what's taller, a house or an office building? And when if something's a little bit vague like that, it's like, okay, think of a standard office building. You think of something that's, you're not going to say houses are bigger than office buildings. So it's questions that have a pretty clear answer that most of us can answer without any trouble. And yet there's one person, they're the third person in the row, is the only one that's getting any of them right. The 2 people before them answer it wrong, and the person who follows them answers it wrong. And after we go through 4 or 5 questions, they kind of just give up, and they start giving the same wrong answer that the people who go before them give. So by the end of it, all 4 of them are giving the wrong answer every time. And here's what's happening. We then thank them. They return to their seats to applause. And I explained that 3 of them were Confederates who were given instructions to answer all the questions wrong.
Oh, wow.
The test actually had nothing to do with perception. It had to do with peer pressure. This is another reason why we believe things that are not true, because all of our friends believe them, and we don't want to be the outcast. We want to be just like our friends. So we'll say, okay, I guess blue blocker sunglasses do reduce eye strain. Whatever. So go ahead.
Oh, this is why it's great to not have friends. No.
So this is actually a test in psychology. It's called the Ash Conformity Test. We all want to conform with our peers, and this is just another way of another of the many ways that we talk about just in that show, how the brain gives you bad information. The brain wants to embrace bad information. And peer pressure is just one reason that it does that.
So it's kind of good to be like I'm not neurotypical. Like I usually being on the spectrum, I tend to not like follow the flow just because I don't know.
Yeah, that's to your advantage in many cases.
I was going to say it's actually it's a good thing in that case.
Yeah, don't listen to me because I'm falling for all of them, Eleanor. Again, like. Oh my gosh, like there's so many things come into my head when we start to think about this stuff, but the what I want to talk about for a second, we should look at the comments too, is the how frustrating is it as a science communicator to just I touched on this a little bit before, but to just know what you know about humanity, like wow, how are we ever going to get to another level? You know what I mean? Like, like for you, it's just there, right? It's like, I don't see us necessarily falling up in any way.
Well, I gotta say, I think your question presumes a little bit that I have some special insight into things that other people don't have. And I'm the first person to tell you that's not true. And that if anyone read the same stuff that I read and did the same,
sure.
I hate to use the word doing research because today that means going to YouTube and watching someone's conspiracy theory.
Right.
That people would come to the same conclusions that I find. Where did it go? Someone asked me and I lost it. Roger asked what caused the hallucination. If you're talking about the thing that I had with the characters up in the tree singing and dancing for me, it was 30 years before I found out, but that was what's called a hypnopompic hallucination. There are two of these. There's hypnagogic hallucinations and there's hypnopompic hallucinations. The same basic thing. Hypnagogic hallucinations happen just as you're going to sleep, and hypnopompic hallucinations happen just as you're waking up in the morning. One of the more common ones is you'll be laying in bed, maybe just as you're going to sleep, or maybe kind of just around the time your alarm's going to go off, and you'll hear something like a door slamming or footsteps on your stairs, some sound that's a common sound in your house. And you'll realize, wait, I'm home alone. There couldn't have actually been anything. That is the most common type of these hypnopompic and hypnagogic hallucinations. You hear a familiar sound in your room. It's not particularly scary or anything. But most people, I think, have had some experience similar to that. So you get the idea. But these hallucinations can be very elaborate. In my case, maybe I was dreaming something, but just as I woke up, this turned into a full-on, full-bore hypnopompic hallucination. So you can see things, you can hear things, you can feel things, you can smell things, you can taste things, and in many cases, they're associated with sleepwalking. So experiences that people will have while they're sleepwalking. They might be going out and having a whole adventure with all kinds of things happening, and you can watch them do it, and you won't see anything that they're seeing. But some of these can be scary and they can be dangerous. But I was lucky that mine was a very rich and positive experience for a little 10-year-old kid.
Yeah, well, we have good questions in there again. But I want to ask you real quick: does this happen to be? I think this happens to other people, but when I'm just falling asleep, it'll be like I slipped on the stairs. Have you ever had that, like that foot movement? Have you ever had that happen?
Oh, Ellen? I'll get like a sudden falling sensation.
Yeah.
Worst thing ever. Yeah.
Yeah.
That wakes me up, and there's no way I'm going back to sleep after that happens.
That's so weird. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, we do it. Just something in the wiring there, I guess. Oh, Ian would probably know. But yeah, go ahead, ask or answer some more questions out there.
Okay, let's see. What have we got?
I actually recently discovered that I dream differently. And people are calling it lucid dreaming because I am always aware that I'm dreaming. Always. And I don't know, you're talking about hallucinations. I don't know, maybe is that what's happening? Because I'm sleeping. I'm literally sleeping. But I'm aware that I'm sleeping. It's weird. I thought everybody dreamed like that.
So you can control your dreams. You can decide.
Yeah, I'm. Yeah. Mostly, there's sensations I'll get that I don't control that in the dream. Like that falling sensation. I'll get things like that, but I'm still aware that I'm asleep. I can make myself walk around. If I'm, worried, I can change things. I can go somewhere else.
Right.
I can just turn the corner. Yeah, and I thought absolutely everybody dreamed like this.
Yeah, no, they don't. A lot of people wish they could. What you're describing.
I've done it.
To me, it's not restful. It's very I wake up feeling like I haven't slept.
Okay.
Hey, Harry.
It's frustrating actually for me.
So lucid dreaming is something. I mean, there's whole communities of people dedicated to lucid dreaming, sharing their experiences, but significantly trying to trigger it, trying to find a way that we can have lucid dreams. And it's funny. I did an episode on this, and so I kind of had to immerse myself in that whole world for a week. And the most common thing, you guys can probably guess this. The most common reason people want to lucid dream. Anyone want to take a shot? What they all cite as the thing they most want to have a lucid dream for?
Well, fly. Yeah.
Nope.
No. Because I love flying in my lucid dreams, and usually what happens is I start to fly like Superman, and it's so exciting I wake up.
It's to act out a sex fantasy.
Oh, well, there you go. I've had those too, and lucid dreamed, but I don't want to go into details, whether or not I might have known my neighbor in a special way.
So I've never had a lucid dream, and I guess there are some people who dream them all the time. Some people who have them It's very rare for people who just have them naturally without needing to do anything to induce them. But inducing them is possible. Anyone can do it, supposedly, or almost everyone, but it requires a lot of work, including training behavior during your waking hours all day, every day. And I mean, I read all about it, and I was happy to report on all of it, but there's no way I was going to go to all of that trouble.
Well, I'll tell you a little trick that worked. My ex-wife and I, we read a very popular book probably in the 90s on lucid dreaming, and they did have all of these things you could do, and I'd say we did it kind of in a halfway measure. But one of the fun little tricks to do is, as you're going to sleep, just ask yourself, am I awake or am I dreaming? Am I awake or am I dreaming? As you're at that point where you're kind of ready to go to sleep, just ask yourself. And you might catch yourself thinking that, and you actually kind of feel like you're dreaming. The other thing is, if you're ever in a dream and you're flying and you're not in a helicopter and you're not in a plane, you're dreaming. And, that's a good way to get, into the lucid state, is that, oh, wow. Because I had somebody fly me like a kite. It was the coolest thing. I was a kite, and I was being flown as a kite, and I realized, oh, I'm a kite. Oh, this is so. Oh, I woke up. It never lasts. I always wake up, or a dream within a dream too. But anyway,
I'm trying to. Okay, one of the things that people try to do is you have to retrain your daytime ability, and you have to get into these habits. So you've got to do things on purpose throughout the day when you're awake, in the hope that this will become a habit, and you will try to do it in your dream.
Oh, wow!
What they probably do is they try to push their finger through their palm. Oh. Now, I'm trying to do it. It's going to fail every time. But the idea is that if I keep getting into the habit of doing this, at some point, my finger's going to go right through my palm.
Ooh!
And I realize, oh, I'm dreaming. I'm having a lucid dream. I can now control it and act out whatever fantasy life I want to have right here in my dream.
I've been acting out enough. I've been like mopping the floors and freaking doing checklists. I just find the anxiety brings it.
Here,
my dream life. Shit.
Ian says, have you heard of Emily Ogden's book, Credulity, A Cultural History of Mesmerism? If not, I suspect you dig it. Really fun to see how far back various grifts reach.
Oh, yeah. I haven't read that particular book, but something that I found was fascinating is there was a sort of an early 20th century skeptic, was this guy named Martin Gardner. He wrote the mathematical puzzles column for Scientific American magazine for most of his year. But his first book, called Fads and Fallacies, talking about basically celebrity psychic scams and everything else, going all the way down the line. And you realize he wrote it in the 1940s. And you can turn to any page and you will see scams and cheap products and rip-offs and just things exactly like the blue light sunglasses, the blue blocking computer glasses. And in the 1940s, it was just the same exact thing with different names and faces. When you're talking about, Ian, when you talk about how far back various grifts reach, yeah, that was one book that really brought that into sharp focus for me. Martin Gardner, Fads and Fallacies.
I definitely, with all of my interest in skepticism over the years, and I really find it fascinating how you would have called the show something different. But yeah, I definitely know of Martin Gardner, and having had him been mentioned, quite a few times. So yeah, it makes me think of like the magicians and skepticism and 3-card Monte and pickpockets and the long con, the short con. These people take advantage of our evolutionary predispositions to doing things, right? They could take advantage of the way we see things, or they take advantage of the way we would react in a certain response. And in fact, they have a fairly good understanding of a limited range of human things that other people don't, and they take advantage of them. So that's That's a whole other very interesting area as well, I think.
Yeah. And then, of course, there's a guy who was a personal mentor and friend and hero to me, James Randi.
Oh, yeah.
What a fantastic guy he was.
Uri Geller didn't like him too much, I don't think.
He was one of the funny things about Randi is he could do. Geller only did 4 tricks. He made an entire career out of fooling scientists by 4 simple magic tricks that weren't even good tricks that are in the back of a 25-cent magic book that you buy at the toy store. And he did them very, very well, though. Randi was the first to say he's quite good with the way that his misdirection and the way that he does the tricks. And Randi could do them all just as well as he could. It was amazing to watch Randi do the spoon bending is one thing, but the key bending was
that one. I could do the spoon bending.
And here's this tiny little 85-year-old man who could do it instantly, and you never saw it happen. And he's holding up the key, and it's bent like a U. That amazed me. He was good.
And the spoon bending one, which I would do, and I have no idea if this is the way Randi or Uri Geller would do it, but somewhere I saw along the way is where you pre-bend the spoon, right? You get it pretty weak, and mess with the molecules, and you do that exactly. You just get it nice and weak, and then it's not going to take much effort to get it to snap apart. And if it does snap apart, you can hold it together a little longer if you want, and then let it droop and all kinds of stuff.
I got to at one of Randi's conferences, the Amazing Meeting that he used to hold in Las Vegas. We did a Guinness Book of World Records for the most people performing a spoon bending all at once.
Oh, and cool!
They had bought this box. They had bought 1,500 spoons, and they had a whole room full of volunteers sitting there going doing preparation of each spoon, and they handed them all out. And then he gave us like a lesson and how to do it. And then we all bent the spoons all at once and got in the Guinness Book of World Records. Yay.
That's pretty cool. Well, Randi, it's been the last year that he passed away, right?
Yeah, just in 2020.
Yeah, that I think the guy that writes for he'll come to me, but I mean Randi's one of those people that created this movement, right? I mean, he's
the whole. Well, yes and no. I mean, really, it kind of became its first. The whole skeptical movement, quote unquote, both of which words that I don't care for, but
whatever that is, right? Yeah.
I mean, it kind of formalized with Psychop back in the 1970s.
Yes, that's what I was thinking. Psychop, exactly.
Yeah. He was one of the founders of Psychop. And what a great name, Psychop, the Committee for the Scientific Investigation of Claims of the Paranormal. But basically, they were the cops. They were the ones who would go out and they would bust the celebrity televangelists, who were using all these tricks to cheat people out of millions of dollars. They would go out and they would bust the fraudsters. And their name was Psychop. I just thought was so awesome.
Oh, and that's a great one.
Yeah, they of course had a rift, and Randi split from the rest of them. And Uri Geller was the cause of that because Randi was unwilling to back down from Uri Geller. And Uri Geller he'd made a lot of money off of his fraud, and he was constantly suing Psychop because of Randi debunking him on television and everything the way that he did. And the other guys in Psychop said, we can't afford this. We got to find other fights to fight. Lay off of Uri Geller, and Randi wouldn't. And so
because then he's winning.
Well, yes, and I mean yes, he does, but at the cost of that loss, you can go out and fight 20 other battles.
Oh no, I know, but I get that, but in Randi's mind, maybe it was, you can't bow to this pressure because they do that all the time now. They do these lawsuits where they know we're going to stop you from what you're doing because you can't afford the legal battle. So I feel him on that.
Yeah. So I mean, I certainly understand both perspectives, but they reconciled later. Maybe, I don't know, it was probably 5 years ago or so at one of his last conferences. They sort of got up on stage and all shook hands, and and
like a band reunion, Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, let's take a peek at the comments one more time, and then Brian, I got to say that I certainly hope you'll come back again, and we can have this kind of fun and talk about stuff. This was just absolutely fantastic, and I love the interaction that we can have with the audience, and being able to tell stories, and so much about what we do is about storytelling. So scan through here so we don't miss anybody. I need to pay a little bit of thank yous to Bernadette, Frank, Lance, and Kim Carolina for their tips. There's kind of two ways that creators like myself can get a little income, and there are some creators on here that make a living for themselves that have a lot of views. But there's two systems. There's a tipping system, which they call the awards, which is a really cool thing because we have awards from I can't pull them up here, but there's like a golden squirrel award, which comes over from another platform. Like Periscope gives you $2. There's some hamster award that somebody gave me the other day, and so I call it dropping a hamster. I got $40 when they dropped a hamster on me. Wow. There's a super heart award from Abyss, and but then there's the sponsorship way that you can do it. So you could go to my you can go. Actually, it's not working on mobile. We've got a glitch. It may be working again. But anyway, you can go to my profile page. It'll say at the top, buy me a coffee. At the bottom, it'll say sponsor. You can sponsor me like on Patreon from $1 to $50,000 a month, I suppose. If you're going to send that much money, I'll give you my bank account. You'll save me a lot of fees. And so that would be great. But it's really a way for I would be awesome if I could make my living on here. But to get a little money, it takes surprisingly a lot of work to book people for this show. It takes me a lot of hours a day to do it. So if I can get $300 or $400 a month to help defer that, and I can bring good people to you to do it, please support your broadcasters, your creators. Jump into a room after this, watch a video. You can always give an award later. The comments are there. You can always comment later and really make somebody's day. I did that today for 3 people. I became a sponsor today, and they were tickled pink. Like, they were super excited because, typically it's us smaller creators that, don't get those very much. So go make somebody's day. I swear, if you just give them $1 a month, they'll think it's really cool. And I want to say that Mr. Brian Dunning has been talking about micropayments forever. And I got to think you were one of the first people that were starting, because that was way before Patreon, right? The micropayments you were doing?
It was way before Patreon. And you want to know a really sad thing is the founders of Patreon came to me before they started the company and pitched me on partnering with them. And I said, that's a stupid idea. Who would ever want to start like that? And then after they launched, they came back to me again and said, hey, we want you to be like one of our flagship programs. And I said, well, here's the reason that doesn't make any business sense for us to do. And anyway.
Yeah. Hey, it happens.
Patreon's a nonprofit, and Patreon's a for-profit middleman that would
right.
be legal for us to go through them. But
to be able to do it. And and I do want to mention that too. Brian does absolutely amazing work. You have programs for, I believe you have programs where teachers can get your full catalog of like Skeptical, your episodes. They get like a little flash drive maybe or something, or download it now. I don't know what they do, but you offer it, for educational purposes, right?
And anyone can get the USB flash drive with all the programs, all the movies, and everything we've ever produced is all in the drive. You can just buy it off the store, but if you're a regular supporter at monthly micropayments of any amount, you can.
Awesome. Well. Oh, very cool. Very cool. That is really good. And I got to thank everybody out there that asked questions tonight and helped us move this dialogue around. I want to thank Kim Chi because she's my concierge in the chats. She lets me know, Brian, if I forget to thank Frank for his Super Heart Award, or somebody subscribes or whatever. And if we get a troll on here, but if we get a troll, She'll tell me you got to go into Periscope and block them because she can't. So she's awesome. I got to thank Eleanor as my technical director. We actually run this like, I've directed television shows, that we run this like what it is. This is a real thing for us, and we take it very seriously. And dude, like, best night ever. Really cool. And last night's episode was awesome. It was a great episode, but for me, just being able to, chat with you and chat about something that I think is very important for the world, and to know that this conversation may in fact influence somebody someday to take a different direction or choice in life because they watch this, seems pretty cool to me. And I know that happens to you a lot, and I really respect you and appreciate you.
Thank you very much. That's all. You're more than way too kind to say all that. Thank you.
No way.
to Tossed Out in Grants Pass. Hello to you too. I'm in Bend. Yeah.
Oh, nice. That's awesome. Thank you, Brian. Hope you solved that 7 times 7 behind you. Thanks for the follow on Twitter.
Got the 9x9 that I'm working on here. It's just I kind of do during the day.
Holy cow.
I can do those no problem, but I just removed the stickers.
They're fun.
You just move the stickers? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's not a thing. That's
no.
That's how I do it.
Have you seen those guys? What's the record on a regular Rubik's Cube? They make special ones that can turn faster, but it's insane.
I've got some of those, the competition cubes. I don't have any in here. I'm not a speed cube. No, but I think they can do it around 6 seconds. You can usually do it around 10 seconds, no matter how it's scrambled.
Yeah, it's just a series of moves that you memorize. Is that how it is, or what? How's that work?
Yeah, it's basically just an algorithm.
Yeah.
You have to have a young brain that's open to pathways being created to do these 10-second solves. There's one mix-up of I had a 3x3 cube around here somewhere that was in this. There's an orientation called Super Twist that is it will take the maximum number of moves to solve it, no matter what method you use. And,
that's cool. Yeah. Hey, CL, congratulations. Best night ever, Rev. I'm a grandpa. 7 pounds, 11 ounces. Beautiful chunker baby girl, Everly Lynn. Awesome, dude. Right. Great to see you, CL.
CL.
Yeah, this platform is really cool because there's lots of communities on here, but then there's a larger community of people. And in fact, at 11, because I'm getting inspired to do things from Clubhouse, like welcome things and stuff like that. But 11 here, in a couple minutes, I'm doing we're going to talk about revenue streams for creators that aren't, sitting at the top of the food chain, but things they can do to kind of bring their revenue up. And actually, honestly, the easiest thing to do is you have to ask. Don't be afraid to ask. Brian asks every time he does an episode to support his program, and he works his keister off to do it. And you hate it every time, right? You hate it every time?
I do. I mean, when I started the show, it was a hobby, and I did it around my regular work, and it was free. I didn't want any money for it. But after it became a full-time job, there's no alternative.
Right. And it is, I'm working nonprofit too, and it's a little weird when I'm out there, hitting somebody up for a lot of money, and I'm like, oh yeah, by the way, my you're paying me too, but thank you. But I Brian, I can pitch anything. I can sell. My dad's a salesman. I'm a natural born salesman. I like to say, little cute sayings about selling ice to Eskimos and all these things. And I'm a really good salesman, but when it's me, when I'm selling myself, it's hard. I just want to crawl back into a corner and be like, let somebody else do it, because I don't want to do it, but I know I have to. So
I hear you.
Yeah. Well, this was just great. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing you on Tuesday. Come to Clubhouse. If you don't have an invite, find somebody that does if you can. If you are serious and you'll use it. I have some. Yeah. Oh, Eleanor has them. I don't know when I'm going to get any more, but hit me up. Hit me up. Yes, you have no friends, Eleanor, so we'll get people hooked up. And please come see Brian. I will be with Brian on on Clubhouse, and Brian will bring some really cool people like Dr. Carl. Like, oh man, that guy was awesome last week. And Natalia Reagan. Yeah, Natalia Reagan, and in fact, Natalia's going to come on the program, and she's an anthropologist and a science communicator, and just a really awesome person. So, and I met her through you, and I appreciate that too.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah. So, Brian, what is happening after the film? What are you doing next?
We're evaluating 3 potential projects right now that we're going to work on next. One of them is another feature film. One of them is a PBS series that we will be self-producing a pilot for.
Oh, cool!
You have to do that for PBS, just like you'd have to do it for Hollywood. You got to
pay all that up front, huh?
Although the whole sales and distribution is a completely different model. And then the third project is an incubator for hopeful science communicators serving underserved communities.
Oh, I like that.
A very exciting project, but complicated.
Yeah. An incubator for, say it one more time.
Basically, content creators who want to do science communication serving underserved communities.
Okay. Well, so our nonprofit.
If you grew up in the worst part of Los Angeles and South Central LA, and yet you want to be a science communicator reaching your particular community, well, I guarantee you there is no great, awesome YouTube show serving that community right now. We would like to help that person get there. Bring in mentors, very successful YouTubers who can share the secrets, provide them.
Well, that's awesome.
They might need.
Yeah, I actually on this, because we have a little lucky period of time between where in the UK it can be like 2 p.m. here and it'll be 8 p.m, and we have that zone of being able to kind of communicate with each other. It's really hard in other parts of the world. I have a friend in Malaysia that's going to be starting a show with me on Thursday nights, and I mean, she's just no, she's okay. She's in the middle of the afternoon, but when we reverse it, it'll be rough on me. But I'm losing my thought here, so I'm just gonna wrap it up. But yeah, come back and see us. Oh, I know. I'm talking to some journalists in the UK. I'm doing it here in the States too, but I'm trying to make some connections with some really good journalists, some well-known journalists over there, and have them come on the platform, have the kids come on the platform here and be able to, get their feet wet in, because we have serious journalists on the platform. We have, I can't remember the guy from CNN, but yeah, we've got serious journalists on here. So to try to hook these guys up with some journalists. So that's cool that we're thinking along the same lines. So anything I can do to support you on that, please feel free. We do something called culturally responsive evaluation with our nonprofit. And, if that could aid you in kind of figuring out how to do that, I'm happy to, to connect you to some things. So this is great. And thanks again very much.
All right. Well, good night. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Thanks, Brian. We'll see you on Tuesday, and just have a great weekend. Stay healthy. You can exit with the little kind of pink phone at the bottom there. It says exit, the bottom of the screen. Are you on your phone or are you on a desktop?
Oh, there, I see it.
There you go. Good to see you, Brian.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. It's been as much fun for me as it has for you. So.
Thank you, man. It was great.
Thank you.
Good night.
Take care. Good night. All right. That was, wow. That was so cool. That was Brian Dunning, everybody, of Skeptoid Podcast. And, I'm going to keep doing this every night, but I got to tell you, that was a very special moment for me. I've been listening to Brian forever. And, 3 weeks ago, Brian and I didn't even know each other. And I just got to host him on the program. So that was great. We're going to jump into, thank you, Frank. We're going to jump into the other meeting that I want to try and have. And we'll see if anybody shows up. We're about 7 minutes late. If you want to join me, we're going to talk about revenue streams for content creators on HAPS. I'll see you in a minute. Peace be with you. Namaste. Love you, Kim. Love you, Eleanor.
on that Cash App Abyss, if you want to help any little bit from anybody. Like if I get 90 people to donate $1, I can fix my phone.
Put your Cash App in the comments because they'll stay there. Thanks, Ian. It was a bunch of fun. Thank you very much. Put it in the comment section there. And help Eleanor get her phone fixed with, if anybody wants to give her a Cash App. If you're watching this on replay, support your creators on the platform. The only way this platform is going to get out of beta and change the world is if we support each other. And we support HAPS by buying coins and by, you're welcome, Abyss, and by sponsoring people. The fact of the matter is, HAPS gets money when people get sponsored, and they got to make money too. So thank you very much. Did you get that up there, Eleanor? Yep, she did. All right, at Crooked Muse on the Cash App. We'll see you in a minute if you're going to come over to the next one. Peace be with you, and namaste. The microphone was muted. Unmute it. You got to say it. You got to unmute it.
Namaste right here.
Yes, we always have to end the show that way. Bye.